today we're going to be talking about test anxiety and how to deal with it, how to manage it. And, this workshop's a little special because normally I would be standing up and I would be yelling at you guys, saying how you guys are studying wrong and how you should put more effort and all of those things, how, you should stop taking notes, stop doing Anki flashcards, this, that, and the other. And but I don't think that would be very appropriate for this workshop when it should be about being calm, focused, energized, and ready. And as you know, I'm all about pushing, I'm all about grit, strength, but there's a time and a place for that. And there needs to be a yin and a yang, a push and a pull. There needs to be a balance. If you're just redlining yourself, constantly pushing on the gas and pushing on the brakes at the same time, which is what a lot of students feel like when they have anxiety. They have this desire to do something, to achieve something, but they also have this anxiety, this wall that prevents them. So it's constantly stressing their nervous system. You can feel it in your physiology as well. And I think it's something a lot of people don't really talk about. I personally haven't dealt with too much test anxiety, which is why I had to do a lot of prior research for this specific workshop, as opposed to the other two workshops where I mostly derived it from my own personal experience. So that's why I think this workshop is special. So there's a couple of things I want to mention before we go ahead and get into it. The first thing is I am not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I am not a mental health professional. So if you deal with clinical anxiety, clinical depression, or any of those types of issues, please seek out professional help. That's first and foremost. Second thing is everything I say in this workshop is intended to improve your performance on the DAT. That is my goal. And improve your performance in university, in your exam. The results matter. And, if it helps you in other areas in your life, that's even better. That's great. There's a common saying that says that people don't have problems in their business. They have problems in their personal life that reflect in their business. And I think it's the same thing for, students and in academia as well. People don't have problems with studying and in their, their grades. They have personal problems that reflect onto their grades. Another thing is anything I say right now is not a fix-all. It's not a one-way ticket. There's not one thing that I say that'll make things switch in your mind. It takes work. Even if I tell you to calm down, obviously that doesn't work. So I understand that. So it takes work to kind of get your mental game on point, and that's where I come as a coach, where I can help you maneuver through that, and help you with the goal of doing well on the DAT and exams and getting you into dental school. The next thing I want to say is, like I mentioned, most of what I'm saying is borrowed from much wiser people than myself. I had to do a lot of prior research in this workshop. So, like I said, most of this is drawn from that research, and the people that have drawn this wisdom from is, first of all, Firas Zahabi. Firas Zahabi is a MMA coach, and he coaches fighters to go in MMA, in the octagon and fight other people. And, he says it's the most scary sport. So the tips that he gives to quell the anxieties for his fighters, when they're about to go into like basically gladiator zone, I think are more than applicable to us students going into a standardized test. The second person is Lanny Bassam. I think I'm saying his name right, but he is the author of With Winning in Mind. And it is the #1 book that allowed me to score the 25 in the 99th percentile on the DAT. And it's basically mandatory reading for my students that I work with, because that's how influential it is. And he is a Olympic medal, gold medalist rifle shooter. You know, I've told this story many times. It's his story that he went into the Olympics shooting a rifle and in rifle shooting, and he scored a silver medal when he was really aiming at the gold, and he thought of himself as a failure. So he asked the other competitors, the other gold medalists, what did you do that allowed you to get the gold? And what the majority of them said was they practiced in their mind more than he did. So then he created a whole mental management system and eventually became very successful in the Olympics, and also is a high performance coach. You know, he coaches doctors, lawyers, performers, Olympic athletes in their mental game. So I borrow a lot of inspiration from these two people. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about, where does anxiety come from? Anxiety comes from uncertainty. It comes from anticipation of negative outcomes in the future. And what you're anticipating when you're in the exam is you're anticipating a bad outcome. You're anticipating failing. You're anticipating getting a question wrong, and, you know, the emotions kind of build up in you, and, you know, oh, when I get this bad grade, everything's going to go so bad. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to get into dental school. I'm going to have to retake this exam. You know, all of these uncertainties, all of this pressure, this stress can really build up. And what Lanny Bassam says is, he says that pressure can be good or it can be bad. Okay. And pressure is real. So if there's too much pressure and, you know, you don't know how to handle it, you start choking. If there's not enough pressure, you don't try enough. So there's this sweet zone where there's just enough pressure for you to get your peak performance, but not too much where you choke, and not so little where you don't actually try. And, you know, when there's anticipation of the exam and you get nervous and anxious leading up to the exam, you know, you're imagining events. So your mind doesn't know the difference between an imagined event and a real life event, which is why those emotions are so visceral and so real. And that's why visualization is so powerful. Positive visualization is so powerful, because you're rehearsing those positive events. But then when you're in anxiety, you're rehearsing those negative events. And those negative events will trigger your physiology. You'll go into fight or flight, and you'll have all these endorphins, norepinephrine, epinephrine, cortisol, you know, adrenaline. And it's so funny that we're literally learning about these hormones when we're learning about the DAT, but yet we don't understand when it happens to us. And, you know, it's exactly like that. So, you know, we don't make the connection in our head when we're super nervous, super anxious, that we're in fight or flight mode. So when you're in fight or flight mode, you want to be, you have this extra energy within you that you need to expend. And then, you know, being aware of that will actually help you in your test anxiety. Another thing is blood sugar and insulin, you know, something that we also learn extensively about. So when a student is studying for the DAT or whatever they're doing, and they're drinking like full sugar boba milk tea with caffeine in it, and they're drinking it, and they say, I feel so anxious. Why am I so anxious when I'm studying? And they can't make the connection in their head that maybe the blood sugar, you know, the sugar in the bubble milk tea and the caffeine has spiked their insulin, you know, because it's a, you know, the high glycemic foods, like such as sugar, you know, causes that insulin rush, and it'll draw all of the sugar out of your bloodstream. So that way you feel that food coma. You also feel that anxiety kick in. So, you know, make sure you avoid sugary drinks when you're studying, you know, as opposed to like low glycemic foods, you know, such as fats and proteins, you know, that are more sustainable when you eat them, and, you know, you have more sustainable energy. You know, your diet is very important. So when students drink, you know, big gulp sodas when they're studying and they can't seem to focus very well, that's probably a reason, and every student is different. So you really have to take, do a self audit and look at yourself and understand where you could be improving in your diet, in your sleep, and understand, what you're feeling in fight or flight leading up to the exam. I personally drink coffee every day, but I'll tell you a story. When I took the MCAT, I drank a whole thing of coffee right before the MCAT. And then in between the break that they gave me, I drank another thing of coffee. I brought 2 cups of coffee with me because I just felt like I needed that. I don't know what I was thinking. I just made a mistake. And, a lot of students are like that too. They don't really have a plan. And I was like that too. I just went into it. I need the coffee so that way my mind is sharp. But it just really amped me up too much and I couldn't focus. So then on the actual exam, on the DAT, what I did was, I just drank a coffee before. I did a full length exam. I went to the testing center, and in between the break that I had, I just had a little snack. I'll go ahead and talk about what to do leading up to the exam and what to do during the exam in just a little bit. But let's say you're dealing with a lot of anxiety before the exam, or you dealing with a lot of anxiety studying. So you should probably take a break, find something to eat, drink some water, and get some exercise and do practice problems that you're familiar with to calm your anxieties, because your brain is very uncertain. So if you do practice problems that you know how to do, your brain will be okay with that. You're in comfort zone. And that's where a lot of students actually go wrong, because they study with the motivation of anxiety behind them. They're not studying because they're motivated to actually score well. They're motivated because they're scared of scoring badly. So when you're studying in an anxiety frame of mind, it can be very difficult to absorb information, and you kind of choke when you're studying too. So it prevents yourself from making mistakes. You're so concerned about making mistakes when you're studying that you don't learn things efficiently, because you learn things best when you get practice problems wrong. I think I got more practice problems wrong than a lot of students actually attempt. So, keep that in mind. Okay, let's go to tip number 1. Tip number 1 is to go to the testing center, drive there, understand the route, and what time you're going to wake up. Imagine yourself going to the testing center, and then block out a day where you're going to actually go to the testing center and look at the room that it is. So, and memorize what it looks like. So that way, when you visualize yourself when you're at home, it becomes a comfort zone. You're very familiar with it, and it's not out of your comfort zone to be in that testing center. And for me, my testing date got changed twice because of COVID. It got changed a month before my exam and a week before my exam. Okay, so that was kind of a little bit of uncertainty, but I already practiced in my head kind of what the testing center should be like, and the new testing center was in my neighborhood. So I had driven down that street before. I knew the building, so it was very familiar for me. So I was very lucky. And I know, COVID causes a lot of people even more uncertainty, which can work against you. And let's go ahead and talk about what you should do the day before and during the exam. A lot of students get the advice that they should kind of relax and chill, take it easy the day before the exam. And that is cookie cutter advice, and you really have to understand yourself to determine whether that advice is good for you or not. Are you somebody that's really, really high strung and you need to kind of take a de-stressing day in order to feel comfortable on the exam? Or are you somebody that actually needs that routine and that structure to feel comfortable going into the exam. So there's no one right answer. I think that a lot of students that, they do relax before the exam and they end up doing okay. But I would argue that if they had a plan, if they had practice leading up to the exam, they would do a much better job. Because a lot of people say, oh, it doesn't matter what you do the day before your exam. You're not going to learn anything anyway. You're not going to learn anything new anyway. And that's true. But the thing is, this test is not about learning things. It's not about knowing things. It's about performing at your best. If you don't get a good night's sleep the night before your exam, you're not going to be well prepared. If you, are super stressed and you're like do a whole marathon before the day of your exam, you're not going to do well. So when people say it doesn't matter what you do the day before your exam, you know what they mean. Like, you're not going to learn anything new. But this is not about learning. This is about performing. Okay. So the next tip is to exercise when you feel that anxiety build up in you. And this is what Faraz Sahabi says. He says that when his fighters get choked up right before their fight, he says that it's just too much energy and they just need to expend it because they're in fight or flight mode. They have those neurochemicals, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and that is telling their body to move. But when you're sitting down, and you're trying to study and you have those anxieties, it can be kind of difficult. So go ahead and get up and move and expend that energy. And that could be a tip that works for some people. That could be a tip that doesn't work for some people. So go ahead and give it a try. Another tip is to, on the test day, don't talk to anybody at the testing center except people that you actually need to talk to. Don't ask somebody, hey, how you feeling? Because they're going to say, I'm really nervous. I'm really scared. And then, emotions are contagious. We are social creatures. So when one person says that they're nervous, that's going to affect you. So kind of like put those blinders on and say, I don't care about, who you or you. I don't care. My goal is to just take this exam and be focused. So don't talk to anybody. So this is a mistake that I made. And I don't think it was because of me, but when I took the MCAT, it was like so crazy. There were so many students rushing around in and out in this small little room. You have your little lockers that you have 5 minutes to put your stuff in. And, you can like look at people and they're like, they have their head down and you feel like they're like zombies about to pass out. So really keep that in mind and prepare for that. And don't let it get to you. I know it's easier said than done, but, prepare for that and kind of have your blinders on. Just look down, look at your notes, look at whatever you need, your phone, and don't look at anybody else. Next tip is don't keep score when you're taking your exam, and don't keep score when you're doing practice exams. Okay, this is very important. So a lot of students, when they're taking exams, they will kind of guesstimate or have an idea of which problems get wrong or right. And then, at the end, I'll say, oh, I think I got a, 87 because I missed this question wrong, and this question wrong. So you're expending extra brain power of keeping track of which ones you got right or wrong. So your mind can only focus on one thing. So you should be very process oriented. Take each individual question and digest it as it is when you're practicing. Just take each individual question. Don't think about if you're getting it wrong or right. Just take it as it is. When I was doing practice problems with one of my students, I was telling my student that I'm not worried about the next question or what's going on, within the next hour or anything that's going on outside of what questions we're asking when doing this problem. What questions are we asking ourselves? How do we find the answer? So you should think about that in the same way. Don't worry about, oh, is this going to be right? Is it going to be wrong? Just focus on process rather than the results of getting it right or wrong. Because if you hit the check marks of the process of how you're digesting the problems, you have a much higher likelihood of getting it right. And I know it's a little bit esoteric what I'm talking about, but go ahead and read the book With Winning in Mind, and he explains it a lot better than I do. And the next thing is, another concept from With Winning in Mind, Rehearse winning only. Don't rehearse, don't torture yourself with the movie, the image in your mind that you're going to fail and you're not going to do well on the exam and you're going to choke and you're going to embarrass yourself and you're not going to get into dental school. And I know it's very difficult to, kind of control your mind. The mind is one of the body parts. This is what Firas Zahabi says, and I think he got it from somebody else. But he says the mind is not like the hand or the leg. I can control my hand at will. I can control my eyes. I control my mouth, my lips. I can control that. But when you tell your mind to do something, it kind of has a mind of its own, and it goes in a different way. So, and it takes practice to kind of guide your mind in the right direction. So you have to be very cognizant, very aware of what you're telling yourself, what stories you're inserting into your mind, what movies. So, it takes a lot of concerted effort to change these mental habits of rehearsing yourself in a winning mindset of like, yes, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to get this score that I want, and I'm going to do well, rather than torturing yourself with the mental image of you failing. And I think a lot of students, they're afraid to visualize themselves winning. They're afraid to set high goals. A lot of students tell me, oh, I'd be okay with a 19 or 20 because, that's acceptable. That's what students get into dental school with, because they're scared to, aim higher because they're scared of disappointing themselves. But as you shoot for the stars, you may land in the moon. And I think that holds a lot of students back when they don't set their goals high enough. I set, I did the same thing. I wrote down I will want a 25 on the DAT, and months before that I even got that, and I certainly didn't really believe it. It was unreasonable. A lot of students say that, like, oh yeah, but I just want to have a score that's reasonable. And it's like, there's nothing reasonable about getting a really good score. There's nothing reasonable about being an Olympic athlete, but someone's gotta do it. It might as well be you that gets the score. And the next tip is you have to know yourself. This is probably the most important tip. You have to know your own levels of anxiety. You have to know your own levels of competence going into the exam, because competence is confidence. When you're confident that you know what you're doing and you're competent in the abilities that you have a lot more confidence going into the exam. So you really have to know yourself, do a self audit. Do I need more time to study, or am I ready for this exam? And are my test anxieties getting out of control, or are you somebody that actually needs more pressure on yourself? It really depends on the students. More students are more laid back, like, yeah, whatever happens, happens. I'm chill. And, they actually need a little bit more accountability. But some students are more high strung and they actually need more tips on calming them down. So it really depends on who you are. There's no one way cookie cutter, one way or the other. So keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and talk about, this is what I call the trifecta. And this is what I tell all my students: affirmations, visualizations, and meditation. Okay. And this is what I did too. And this is, you just have to take my word for it on this stuff. There's a lot of research on it. And, all these things that I'm about to tell you, if it's good enough for Olympic athletes, it's good enough for us. Okay. So the first thing is you got to write your affirmations. Okay. Write down what score you want, what you're going to get. Use, creative language, what school you want to get to. So I'm going to give you an example. I will get a 25 on the DAT. I'm happily and easily studying to score a 25 on the DAT. I am a dental student at whatever school of your choice is. And use these are very simple examples, but go ahead and use emotional and creative words. I use curse words when I write down my affirmations because, it resonates with me. I will, get that, that's the way I work. But if it's, if you're a different type of personality, is I'm easily gliding to my destination of my goal of becoming a dentist. Everything is so easy. I'm gliding. It's almost like an elevator lifting me up to my goal. And this is not being delusional. It's just within the practice mind framework, because it's obviously not going to be that easy. But you need everything that can help you. Next thing is visualization. Like I said earlier, the mind does not know the difference between an imagined event and a real event. The very, very famous study where there's, two groups of people. One group, practice free throws, in real life. Another group imagined practicing free throws, and the third group didn't do anything at all. And they noticed that, and these are all beginner baseline. The students that practice free throws in their mind had the same results as the students that practiced free throws in person. Okay, so that is objective evidence of how visualization works, because the mind does not know the difference between an imagined event and a real event. The adrenaline is still pumping, the cortisol is still pumping. So you have to visualize yourself in those winning situations, and visualize yourself taking the exam in the exam center, so that way you're comfortable in that area, and also visualize yourself studying, in the third person and in the first person. So you wake up, you see your computer screen, and you visualize yourself having the information go into your mind. Okay, the third thing is meditation. Meditation with the focus of increasing your focus bandwidth. Okay, focus is like a muscle, and it can be improved upon. So if I told someone who is not used to focusing, focus for 8 hours right now, it would not be possible, because that's like asking somebody who has never lifted weights before, okay, go ahead, let's bench this 200-pound weight right here. That wouldn't really be very useful for them. You could tell them to do that, but it's not going to work. So what I do with my students is I have them track their focus bandwidth. So you can either do this using, everyone knows about the Pomodoro method, but I have this different method, because sometimes the Pomodoro method, the alarm will actually knock you out of concentration, which is not good, right? So you're in the middle of a 30-minute study session, and then you get the alarm and you actually get knocked out of focus. So what I would recommend is every time you notice yourself going out of focus, you write down the time. Okay, so then in the first 2 to 3 hours of studying, yes, 45 minutes. Yes, that was good. Another 45 minutes. And okay, and it gets to 30 minutes. And then the next 3 hours, you notice, okay, I can barely focus for 5 minutes. So now you know that your focus is where you're losing your focus, and you can go ahead and need to take a break, because focus is limited. You have a finite amount of it. And, the brain takes 20% of its calories that you consume. So, really take that in mind. You may be low on blood sugar. Your focus is off. You may be strained. Like, don't redline yourself. And because, it's like a muscle, you don't want to strain it too much. And if you get too frustrated, you're not going to want to focus and study anymore. That's why when I recommend my students, and I ask them, which sections are you comfortable with? And then one student will say, I absolutely love PAT. It's actually relaxing when I do PAT. Okay, let's start off with PAT. That's the first thing you're going to do. So that way you get into the comfort, the flow zone of doing those practice problems for many hours at a time. And then when you get then we'll transition into OChem later, when it's more difficult. And, this is how I think about the DAT destroyer too. It's so difficult that you don't want to throw yourself into doing DAT destroyer questions right away. You want to get into used to practicing that focused muscle first before you tackle those big, big heavy weights of DAT destroyer. So yes, meditation, you can look up meditation techniques online. I just do simple breathing. It is what it is. And, with the focus of increasing your focus bandwidth of 2 hours at a time. You should at least have focus bandwidth of 2 hours, because the exam is a 2-hour chunk, then you have a little break and a 2-hour chunk. So if you can focus for 2 hours at a time, that's perfect. Okay, sleep is important, obviously. Without any sleep, you're not going to be able to focus. Okay, so let's move on to motivation. How do you motivate yourself to study? How do you motivate, not just for the DAT, to just study in general? Okay, so the first thing you have to ask yourself is, who do you hang around? Who are your close friends? Are those people hardcore studiers? Are those people that always talk about what grades that they have, the exams that they've taken, dental school, medical school, or whatever? Or are the friends that are, business majors and they're always talking about starting businesses, or they art majors and they're always talking about art? So, there's going to be a mismatch in the culture in your mind. And when I went to UC San Diego, I lived in the biology building for transfer students. So everybody on my floor was a biology major, and everybody talked about was studying all day long. So the culture was very rich in, you basically gain clout by studying. You gain clout by doing well on the exams. And that really helped me do well. I eventually got straight A's for a couple of semesters while at UC San Diego. And so you really have to keep that in mind, and be careful, because a lot of pre-dental societies, pre-med societies, it can be a little bit toxic, as it can be just a little bit too hardcore. So there's pros and cons to it, but find people that you are actually like you. You don't want to go to the foreign exchange student that doesn't know any English but is really good at math, and you're trying to become best friends with them. That's not going to work. You have to be friends genuinely and have like a group of friends that you study with, and it keeps you accountable. Another thing is, make studying easy. So make your study environment comfortable. Make it somewhere that that you won't have distractions or disturbances. If you're comfortable in sweatpants and a t-shirt, go ahead and study in that as well, because you want to be in a very focused mindset, that you're comfortable in. Maybe you want to even put on a uniform when you study. Okay, I'm in focus mode. I'm going to go ahead and put on my special jacket or my special shirt. And, I did something like this as well. And, one of my students, she has a study lamp, she only turns on for studying. And I was like, that's ingenious. That's very, very smart, because it puts your mind in a frame that you're ready to study. And I did the same thing as well. Let me go ahead and show you. And I didn't even know I did this. Okay, well, anyway, I had this pair of like big like glasses, and they're like yellow glasses, and they were meant to block blue light when I was studying, because my eyes would get a little bit strained when I was looking at the screen for so long. And I didn't even realize that was, when I put that on, that was my cue to study, in it, like habit formation theories. When you have a cue, you have a response. And I actually wore those glasses when I was taking the actual DAT exam, and they look ridiculous. They absolutely look ridiculous, but it worked. And this is something that I realized later when I was doing a little bit more research, and it's called the alter ego effect. So you kind of have a cue to kind of put yourself in a different identity than you're used to, like somebody. So I told myself that I was a nerd, and I'm somebody that can definitely study for 8 hours a day. I don't care about anything else. I don't care about friends, family, whatever, and I put myself in the mindset that I need to get it done because I'm a nerd, and it worked. And, a lot of top level performers do this. There's, and what is this guy's name that wrote the book, The Alter Ego Effect? I think it's like Todd Herman or something. And, he's also a high performance coach. You can see a theme here. And he, he tells a story about Sasha Fierce. Sasha Fierce is Beyonce. So when Beyonce was earlier in her career, she had to have an alter ego, so that way she could be confident in performing. And that alter ego was Sasha Fierce. And, you can go ahead and look up Todd Herman, Alter Ego Effect. Go ahead and look up Firas Zahabi and Lanny Bassam. Okay, another thing. You have to know why you're doing what you're doing. Why are you spending so much time and effort becoming a dentist or doctor? And you have to be honest with yourself when you're asking yourself these questions. For me, I had my I had attempted to become a dentist and a doctor, and I didn't go so well. So I really had a lot to prove to myself and others. And I really thought about who I was accountable to. I was accountable to everyone who believed in me. I was accountable to all the friends and families who believed in me, all the professors who spent their time writing letters of recommendations for me, everybody who gave me advice and mentored me. I was accountable to them to actually achieve my goal. So really think about the people in your life who you're accountable to, because it can really make a big difference. And I think that's where I'm gonna end it. Yeah, so go ahead and ask any questions in chat. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.